In this chapter, we're going to look at a couple of different ways that we can bring our walkie-talkie into Keyshot to render it. But for those of you who may not be familiar with Keyshot, let's take a quick look at it. So here we have Keyshot's gallery, and you can see it's a very high-end renderer used by a lot of professionals. It's also used by a lot of hobbyists. There are a couple of different versions of it, and what I like about it, it's very easy to use. You can very quickly set up renderings that look photorealistic, but it's also deep enough that if you're a professional and you really want to spend some time arranging lights and materials, you have the ability to do that. So we're going to bring our model into Keyshot, and there's a couple ways we can do that from within Rhino. The first version is to import the Rhino data, and we'll look at that, but probably the better way to import the data is to actually use the Keyshot plugin that's available. And if we're at the Keyshot website, we can go to Resources, Plugins, and if we scroll down here, we'll see the Rhino logo, and when we click on that, you'll notice we're able to download either the Rhino 5 or the Rhino 4 plugins. Once those are downloaded, just run a typical installer to install those within Rhino. Let me close this all up. All right, so now we're back in Rhino, and if you'd like to follow along with me, what I'm going to do first is just bring in a very simple file so we can kind of explain some of the things that are happening. So to follow along, let's go into our sample models folder. In chapter 10, we're just going to open up the import test file. And we'll just go ahead and open that up. So you can see a very simple file. It's shaded. I've got my mesh set to my favorite setting with all zeros that we've looked at in several examples. And I have all my shapes on separate layers as we've discussed in previous lessons. So I can apply different materials to all of these within Keyshot. So let's jump over to Keyshot. And when you first launch Keyshot, this is how things look. You just get sort of this generic kind of gray background. If I hit my space bar, it's going to pop up my project window. And if I go to Environment, you can see this is actually the HDRI that's lighting the scene up for us. So if I wanted to bring the data into Keyshot the standard way, I would just click on Import. And when the import window opens, I'll just click on the file I want to open, and it opens Rhino files directly, so no problem there. I'll click Open, and now I see this little window. And what I want to make sure I'm doing is I want to hit Keep Original. And the reason I want to do that is because then it uses the real units for your model. So it brings everything in at the correct size. That way, if I bring in other data from Rhino projects, I know the sizes are all going to work together. I'll click on Import. And then I'll just zoom out here. Let me close this window. And I should mention I'm zooming out by holding down my Alt key and then dragging my right mouse button left or right. I can also zoom in and out just by turning my mouse wheel, my middle mouse wheel. So you can see there's our scene. And if I jump back to Rhino, you can see it's taken the actual layer colors and it's created that for us. Now there's nothing wrong at all with going that way about this. But what you'll find works a little easier, let me go ahead and close Keyshot here, and I'll just discard my changes, is I have the plugin loaded for Keyshot. And I can find that up here in my Rhino toolbar. So I can go to Keyshot, and I'll press Render. And what it'll do, it'll fire up Keyshot for me. It'll bring in my image. And why I really like using this way is because any changes I make to my Rhino data, I can get it to update into my model. So let me show you what I mean here. So notice we have a sphere layer that's turned off. If I turn this back on now, and let's say maybe I was creating a sphere and it hadn't existed before. Now if I go to Keyshot and I click on Update, I'll see Keyshot Flash. And now if I go back into Keyshot, you can see that that sphere is now part of my scene. Now one thing to note is if I turn that layer off and hit Update, it's not going to take it back out of the scene. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. What's also nice is, let's say I go into my cube here and I put a fillet on the edges. So let me choose these two edges. And I'll hit Preview. And I think I'll make that a little bit larger. Let's go ahead and make a 3mm fillet. Now if I go to Keyshot and hit Update, when I jump over to Keyshot, you'll notice sure enough, it's updated my model and it's put those blends or those radius edges in there for me. And I can undo that, hit Update, and jump back to Keyshot, and it's done that for me as well. So again, that's why I really like the plugin for Rhino and Keyshot. As far as I know, that is a PC-only plugin, so if you're using the Mac version of Rhino, I don't believe that's supported as of yet. And that's strictly because the Rhino Mac version is still in beta, so it's still changing. Once they finalize that, Keyshot has said they will definitely generate a plugin for that. Now, moving around in Keyshot is very easy. If I just want to kind of helicopter around, I hold down my left mouse button and just drag around in the scene. If I want to pan from left to right or up and down, I just use my middle mouse button and move my control around. If I want to zoom in and out, as I mentioned, I can use my click wheel and spin that, or I can hold down Alt and drag my right mouse button, so either one of those. If you ever can't remember some of the quick keys in Keyshot, all you have to do is type the letter key, and a little map pop up of all the hotkeys here. So we have my camera moves, some different things for adjusting my environment, some different file quick keys, some general keys, interface keys, some material hotkeys, and some different hotkeys for how the performance mode works. I can switch that off by typing the letter K again. So if I want to pop up sort of the document settings and my environment tab, I just have to hit my space bar and I just tap it. And you can see I get a project window, I've got a scenes, materials if I want to edit materials, environment, my camera, and my document settings. I can also bring up my materials library by pressing the letter M. And that'll bring up my Keyshot library, some different color libraries we have, some environments, which are where we get all of our lighting, different backplates, some textures, and if I've created any renderings, they'll be under this tab. And I can get rid of that by typing the letter M again, and then get rid of my project window by hitting the space bar again. And now we're ready to import our walkie-talkie model, and we'll continue that in the next lesson.